There certainly is no ignoring the politics in the United States. Many Americans feel U.S. President Donald Trump is tarnishing the image of the country, while others feel he is definitely making America great again. Also in the U.S., the hashtag #MeToo movement has brought down many big shots in Hollywood. That's a fact. But to discuss this with me and many more issues, our usual U.S. reporter, who's now in Johannesburg, South Africa, Sherwin Bryce-Pease. Wow, nice to see you.
I think my mother's really happy I shaved. So,
well, listen, I have to say something. Since we last met, you've gone a lot grayer.
I have.
Is that Donald Trump?
I have, but what's your secret, Leanne?
Yeah, I don't know.
What's your secret?
I dye mine, but
it's genetic.
You see, it's the great thing is gives you that edge, doesn't it?
It's genetic. I am older. I'm almost 40. And I am covering politics and everything else in the United States. It's a tough job, it's a responsible job, and it's demanding. And maybe my hair wants to have a conversation with South Africa today.
Well, that's what I think. So let's do it. I mean, I think it's important. I mean, when Donald Trump was elected president, I mean, that is something that the world was not expecting.
Well, let me tell you where I was. I was in Times Square. Sophie McQuenna, the foreign editor, was with us. We were waiting for the big announcement, right? And thousands of people gathered in Times Square. We couldn't actually get into the venue where Hillary was due to give that historic speech, the breaking of the ceiling, the glass ceiling speech that never actually happened. Yeah. And you could see the mood. New York is a liberal part of the country. Don't get it wrong. I'm sure there were other places where the opposite of the liberal enthusiasm was the enthusiasm for Donald Trump. And you could see as Florida came in. Florida was a critical state. As another critical swing state came in, they all went to Donald Trump, and then sort of Hillary had to sort of claw her way back. And at the beginning of the night, the projections were 80% in favor of Hillary Clinton winning the election. It was almost like a thermometer that went cold. And suddenly it was Donald Trump, 50-50.
My gosh.
Donald Trump, and the mood in Times Square shifted. People were crying. People were consoling each other. And I had to go live on Morning Live. I was like, get these crying faces behind me immediately, because that speaks to the story. People were devastated, and people were they were devastated for weeks. They had to lift themselves up and continue, and that's what you saw, I think, the day after Donald Trump's election with the million-strong march in Washington, D.C.
I mean, that was one of the most incredible moments in history. It doesn't matter whose history, but the world watched on, and it just created momentum because so much came after that. But what I really need to ask you is, I mean, obviously we see reports about Donald Trump as a president and what he's doing, and there's a lot of negativity around him. We read his tweets every single morning, and the whole world does. We wait in anticipation to see what Donald Trump has dreamt up the night before.
Literally, because he tweets from
as
his
he
bedroom.
wakes up. I mean, literally. But what is it like in the States under a Trump presidency?
It's unpredictable, and I think the point is that when you look at a presidency, whether it's in South Africa or anywhere in the world, you look for predictability. You have a communication strategy. The White House has a director of communications, and their role, beyond that of the press secretary and the team that deals with the media on a daily basis, is to strategize about what is this president's agenda and how do we make that happen? How do we get immigration reform done? How do we build the wall, if you will? And that takes media engagements, town halls where the president presents his agenda. And the tweeting gets them off message. They then have to put out fires instead of communicating the broad strategy. And for us as journalists, I mean, I can speak from experience. White House bureaus, whether you're talking about CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post, they have had to fortify those bureaus with more staff because the breadth of the exercise, the breadth of the Trump White House is so broad now, given that he tweets so much, and that the narrative is constantly changing as a result of that. But he is the president of the United States. Those tweets are official statements of the White House that will eventually end up in the National Archives of the United States in Washington. So whatever he does, whether you think it's a knee-jerk reaction or shooting from the hip, he's the president, so we have to cover it. So it's a very stressful environment, I think, for a lot of journalists.
I can imagine, and I mean,
and also the balance, Leanne, between subjectivity and objectivity, and the lies and the falsehoods and the alternative facts. I mean, journalists have a difficult role covering this White House. And you're seeing the posture change, I think, as a result of Trump.
Well, certainly, and also Donald Trump's stance towards journalists and the way that he is lambasting journalism and junk news and all of this. But let's look at this book that's come out, Fire and Fury, because, I mean, I think that's what most people are speaking about, and he certainly is dedicating a lot of his characters towards that too.
Well, this is an insider's look into what is happening in the White House. I mean, you're quoting Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon calling the actions of Donald Trump Jr. meeting with Russian officials treasonous in this book. He refers to President Trump as having the temperament of an 11-year-old child. Sure. I mean, and many people, observers listening to that, nod their heads and go, yeah, that sounds about right. But the president is obviously furious, is calling him a nickname, as you know, calling him Sloppy Steve.
Yeah.
But Sloppy Steve is essentially the strategist that got Donald Trump elected. So it's amazing how in a year, I mean, he's fired a few people have left the White House over the course of his first year in office, but it's interesting to see how quickly, if they turn on him, he turns right back on them. And Steve Bannon has resigned from Breitbart News, and he's lost his radio show. So the Republicans have turned against him, and Republicans are happy because they didn't like Bannon to begin with.
Wow.
Bannon gave them Trump. Remember that?
Yeah.
They didn't want Trump.
And now there's a book. Listen, what about Oprah? Because, I mean, Oprah gave this amazing speech at the Golden Globes, which I'm sure many people watched, whether at the Golden Globes or on YouTube. It's everywhere. I mean, look, I didn't hear her saying I'm running to be president, but it felt like a presidential speech.
And Meryl Streep, I think, tweeted something and made the case for for why Oprah should be president and who should be in her cabinet. Look, I think there is this idea that celebrities, Ronald Reagan was a Hollywood actor, Arnold Schwarzenegger ran for governor. I mean, that was a surprise to begin with, but he wasn't tweeting all the time. So there is this notion that Oprah will run for president has been in the narrative for some time, not just based on the speech. She was a big supporter of Obama. Many people thought that she would run after Obama. Why aren't we talking about Michelle Obama, right? What happened to Michelle Obama? Oprah has a good life. I don't know if she's going to run. Can she do it? Yes. Trump says he'll beat her if she does. Let's see it.
That'll be an interesting one. There's also Kanye West, which we can throw into it, but we won't concentrate too much on that.
But Leanne, I don't think she's qualified to be president.
Well,
I don't think he's qualified to be president.
No.
I think it takes a certain kind of policy whack, someone that really understands the issues. I mean, yes, you can dip into women's issues and you can dip into social justice from time to time, but if it's not in your core, I mean, you're a news anchor and you do this for your life. This is your life's work.
I wouldn't run for presidency.
No, right? I mean, stay in your lane a little bit. She's running a girls' school here. She's doing a lot of social justice projects, funding people to go to black universities in the States. She's doing a lot. She's got a great life. I think the White House would change all that, and that's the calculation that she would have to make.
Just very quickly, I mean, time is my enemy. You obviously have been running as a term for, I think it's the chair or president of the UN Correspondent Association, which is amazing. You've been re-elected. I saw you having dinner with Angelina Jolie. I mean, for goodness sakes, you were seated at the same table as her.
Right.
You know, this is a very prestigious and wonderful position to have. The year ahead for the UN, South Africa and Africa in particular, the face has changed.
Very briefly, I'm the head of the organization that manages the relationships between the International Press Corps at the UN, of which there are 260 members, and the UN. Remember, we work at the UN, but we are not of the UN. So we are the bridge that joins the two. And our big project, the dinner you're referring to, is actually a gala awards that gives awards to journalists in 4 categories that cover the UN around the world. So that's the focus. And at the gala awards, we celebrate the work that is being done by a goodwill ambassador. Last year, the year before last was Leonardo DiCaprio for his work on climate change with Ban Ki-moon. This year was Angelina Jolie, because she's been a long-standing envoy for refugees. I mean, you often see her in refugees camps. She's addressed the UN Security Council. She's not just an activist, an actress. She's the social justice activist, and a good one at that. And she's using her position to give back. So we honoured her that day. I mean, I didn't have a long conversation with her. She sat next to the Secretary General. I was sitting next to him. I welcomed her to the event. I said, thank you for coming. She was gracious. We shook hands, and there's a picture to prove it.
Well, I love that. I love that. So you didn't talk about Brad Pitt and the kids, but we'll leave that conversation.
Next year.
Next year you can talk about that. Sherwin, we love your work, and we love seeing you, and thank you. When are you going back now?
Tomorrow back to the freeze.
The big freeze. Dress warm, stay warm. Thank you so much. Our US correspondent, Sherwin Bryce-Pease, here in South Africa, where, of course, talking about US issues, it could be an hour-long conversation, but there's no time. And that's why I'm saying goodbye. Have a beautiful day, everyone. Sherwin, we'll see you in New York.
Thanks, Leanne.
Have a fabulous flight. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. See you tomorrow. God bless you. Bye-bye.